We're doing it! Not much farther!
Where are we going?
All the way to the top!
This week I got to try out Mass Effect Andromeda for a few hours, and as a long-time fan of the Mass Effect series, of course, the big question is, did it live up to my expectations?
Generator.
Now, before I tell you about the game, I have to tell you that EA flew me to Sweden to try this game out, and that technically makes this a sponsored video. This video is sponsored by EA. They are really keen that we are upfront and open with that fact, and so that's what I'm doing right now. Just so you know though, they did not pay me, that no money has exchanged hands, they have not stipulated any conditions. I am free to say whatever I want about this game. The only thing that you should probably know is they have offered me a free copy of the game for PC, and they did buy me lunch. Indian food. And it was pretty nice. But apart from that, this video is going to be my unbiased opinion. Having got that out of the way, let's move on to the million-dollar question. Is this a good game? Is it a worthy successor to the Mass Effect series? That's actually two questions. Well, on the subject of whether it's a good game, it's hard to tell after a few hours, but generally I get a positive feel about it. I think I'm going to enjoy this game. However, as a successor to Mass Effect, I'm not sure. There are some good aspects, and there are some bad, and I know that somewhat nuanced opinion is going to annoy an awful lot of people, but that's where I'm at with this. I'm not completely sure yet. I'm definitely going to play the game. I was going to buy it even if they hadn't have gifted it to me. I am going to play it. I'm going to need to decide whether it's a great game or not, but it's difficult to say right now. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the bad things first. I'm just going to get them out of the way so that we can move on. The first negative I noticed was unfortunately the first thing I did in the game, and that's the tutorial. The game tries to teach you the basics whilst playing the game, but it feels very contrived. It really does hold your hand in a fairly aggressive manner, and honestly it just seemed to interrupt the drama of the moment. It's very hard to explain, but you constantly felt like everyone was in tutorial mode, but something vaguely important was happening at the same time, and it didn't really work for me. Now, of course, the tutorial is only at the start, so once you're past that, you're past it. One thing that kept annoying me at various stages was something that you don't get past, and that is the fact that when you activate things, like when you talk to people or open containers or open doors, you hold the E key down for about half a second and a little circle fills in. You don't just tap the key, and I'm not sure why, but it was really kind of annoying. I suppose it's to stop you from accidentally opening something or accidentally talking. It gives you a chance to change your mind. Honestly, I'm not sure why you would need that. I just want to tap E and open a door, or tap E and talk to someone. It's possible there is an option to change that in the options, but there are actually a hell of a lot of options, and I didn't find one at a cursory glance. Maybe if there is one, I would have stopped myself being annoyed, although why it's set up like that as default, I've no idea. If there isn't an option, I think they should patch one in. It's the sort of thing it's just a little strange, and for people who are used to just tapping the E key, little annoyances like that will actually get on people's nerves. The next negative is slightly more important than the previous two, and it's the animations. The standing and walking animations occasionally looked a little odd, but even worse than that, sometimes the facial animations during dialogue seemed a little off. It's very difficult to describe exactly what was wrong with it because, of course, facial expressions are a difficult thing to quantize anyway. It just felt sometimes like the person who was talking, their face wasn't quite matching the words or the tone they were using, so it was a little off. It wasn't in every case though. Plenty of the dialogues were fine, but some of them just felt a little... I got a very Uncanny Valley vibe from them as well, so this is something that I was not expecting. And conversation's a big part of a game like this, especially in a game that looks as good as it does. When it looks this good, if the facial expressions don't quite work for you, that could be a problem. There were also some instances where the voice acting felt a little weak as well. It wasn't a consistent thing. Generally it's pretty good, especially in the main characters, but occasionally you just listen to an NPC and it just didn't feel as believable as you would expect in a game like this. On a related note, I have to talk about the protagonist's voice, at least the male one, and I hate to say this because it's actually very unfair. The voice actor was great, he did a great job, the lines were well delivered.
If it's what we hope it is, it'll be one for the history books. You got a quote ready? One small step.
But it wasn't a Commander Shepard kind of vibe, you know, and that is terrible. No two characters should be the same and they should be different, but there was something about Commander Shepard's voice, at least the male one for me, that really, it just worked. It was an awesome voice and it defined the character, and I didn't love this voice as much as I loved that one. It's really unfair, it is, because what I'm doing now is I'm pretty much projecting what I had in Mass Effect 1, 2 and 3 and kind of hoping it's there in Mass Effect Andromeda, and that's a terrible thing to do, but I can't help it. The main voice protagonist in Andromeda, maybe his voice will grow on me with time, but in the original Mass Effect series it didn't have to. I thought he had an awesome voice from the very start. Now I feel really mean. Now I actually think expectations like this are going to be one of the biggest hurdles Mass Effect Andromeda has to overcome. The idea that people are going to be judging the protagonist by, you know, Shepard's standards is going to continue throughout the game. Whilst nobody thinks Mass Effect Andromeda is the fourth Mass Effect game, as in a continuation of the originals, I think a lot of people are expecting a similar experience. Completely new story, completely new character, but a similar experience. And I have to tell you, in my opinion, that is not going to happen. These are very different games, and I think a lot of it comes down to the galaxy you find yourself in. In the original Mass Effect, you were a part of this galactic civilization, this amazing alliance of races whose seat of power was the Citadel, which was this super high-tech, very clean and advanced, well, I don't know, space station built by a previous alien civilization that had mysteriously disappeared. The game had a kind of Star Trek Federation vibe to it. Of course, a big part of the original story was the fall of this galactic civilization, the threat it suddenly faced. Mass Effect Andromeda, on the other hand, is pretty much the opposite of this. You are a group of colonists who've arrived in a new galaxy hoping to start a new civilization. You're pretty much at the other end of the spectrum. You are pioneers in an uncharted territory. You are the alien invaders. And I have to tell you, it makes the game feel completely different. It really was odd. In many ways, it was very familiar. A lot of things looked the way they looked in the original Mass Effect games, and yet the entire concept felt backwards. It was quite jarring, and I think you're going to have to come to terms with that. If you're expecting another experience the same as the last, but you know, with new characters and a new story, you're going to be disappointed. You've got to approach Mass Effect Andromeda with a completely open mind and say, no, this is a totally new galaxy, totally new characters, and yes, the voices might not be of my favourite characters, and no, Garrus is not going to be there, although I believe I met somebody who has his voice. Not that that's a big surprise, but it is a totally new game. And that is something I think Mass Effect Andromeda is really going to have difficulty shaking off. The expectations built up from the previous games. When I finally get to play this game all the way through, that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and shrug off all of the nostalgia I have for the original games and try to enjoy Andromeda for what it is. And it does look like it could be a good game because there were plenty of good things to talk about, which is what I want to do right now. Now, the way a game looks is less important to me than how it plays, but I have to tell you, Mass Effect Andromeda is an amazing looking game. The graphics are phenomenal, with the exception of the animations that I talked about earlier. This game does look great. I only visited a couple of planetary areas, but I was very impressed with what I saw. I do remember exploring one ship and trying to find a way to turn the lights on because it was very dark and creepy, and I just felt the atmosphere when I was in that ship. It was just so well done. The movement and combat mechanics seem to have been massively improved over the previous games as well. For example, you now have a jump function. Yes, you can actually jump up and down in a Mass Effect game, and that makes a big difference. There is also an evade or dodge function. I didn't experiment with that very much, but I'm glad to see that sort of thing in this game. It makes it a lot easier to move around the battlefield, to get to new positions of cover, and the cover mechanics are really well done this time. It's far more fluid, far more natural. You don't actively say go into cover there. If there is cover where you are, you will adopt it, and it really feels very natural, very fluid. And it doesn't have those conveniently placed barriers that are so obvious. The ones you had in Mass Effect 2 and 3 where you knew combat was coming because you could see the cover points. No, in this game you can take cover behind a wide variety of objects and they all look perfectly natural, so you've got no real hint that combat is coming. The gunplay is pretty good. Of course, now you have ammunition rather than thermal clips, so that's a little different, but it doesn't change much except the fact that you need to pick ammunition up. Oh, and you can now holster your weapon if you want to. Believe it or not, you can now put your weapon away, and when you do so, the vision pulls back a little and you get more peripheral view, which is really nice when exploring. There are still combat power combinations, which, for those of you who didn't play the original games, are where different powers, when combined, have an extra effect. So, for example, if you pull someone from behind a rock with your biotic power and then hit them with a concussion grenade, it does extra damage and has a far greater force, which flings them even further away. There are a lot of those in the original games. I'm assuming the same is true of Andromeda, and they seem to work just fine. I'm not sure how easy it is to combine them with the powers of your teammates, as it was in the first 3 games. I'm assuming you can still do that because that is pretty important, but I didn't get far enough in the game where my teammates had powers I could use that way. I didn't actually see anything on the heads-up display either, so I assume that's something you figure out later on. You can still command your companions to go to different places the exact same way as you did in the original games, although I didn't see a slow down time function as you had in those games. In the original 3 games you could press the spacebar, I think it was, and it would slow down time, or pause it actually, and you could look around and give commands. I didn't see the same feature. Again, I only played for a few hours, perhaps it is there, although of course the button for space is now jump. Maybe it's been removed. Not sure how I feel about that. If it has been removed, That will of course mean it's going to be a little more hectic. You're going to have to be faster thinking. But of course the downside there is it becomes a little hard to get those great power combinations working together. Now, if you did not like the streamlined character build system in Mass Effect 2 and you preferred the more complicated one in Mass Effect 1, you are actually going to like Mass Effect Andromeda's character system. There are a lot more things to play around with. You've got quite a lot of skills, combat skills, biotic powers and tech skills, way more than you had in Mass Effect 2 or 3. Oh, and each skill actually has some different levels, and you also have a lot more freedom than you did in any of the previous games. You can choose a class, well you have to choose a class when you start, but it only dictates what starting skills you have. It does not prevent you from taking any other skills or powers that you want to take. So for example, you could start out as an expert sniper and then just spend all of your points in biotics and work your way towards getting the Vanguard charge power if you wanted. You can develop your character any way you want. Lots of different skills have some requirements. You might have to spend quite a lot of points in one area before you unlock something, but you will be able to unlock it. There is also a new concept called profiles, which I won't describe in great detail because it is story related to some extent, but it allows you to customize your character even further and develop new synergies. You will unlock those as you get further in the skill trees. I'll let you figure that one out yourself, but honestly it really does add yet another level to the character development. You can of course customize the look of the character, you can change the face, the hair, even the color of the hair, and you can get quite outrageous. I didn't get much chance to play around with the inventory, so I can't tell you the absolute details there, but I did see you could research and develop new weapons, and you can apply modifications to your existing weapons, so there is some level of customization in your loadout. Another new mechanic that I rather enjoyed was the scanner mechanic. You have a scanner now and you can scan objects, and it will very often give you written information, but occasionally one of the teammates will start talking about the object you're scanning, or you'll hear a radio message about it, and it gives you a lot of great information. So the game feels a little more, well, it's like it's encouraging you to explore and investigate things now, and I do like that feeling. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my first impressions of Mass Effect Andromeda after playing for a few hours. Some good, some bad. However, what I saw still makes me want to play the game. I still intend to do a full playthrough, and I'm pretty excited to see where it's going to go. The story itself definitely piqued my interest, and I'm looking forward to giving you a final review once I finish the game, which, if you are a regular on my channel, will probably be about 10 years after everybody else does. So thank you for listening this far, and if you want to join me for my final review whenever that happens, you're more than welcome to do that. I will see you guys next time.